नमो ओम विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांता स्वामी नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद. All glories to the assembled devotees. Very happy to meet all of you. Um, this topic is very nice, and it's also the second last day of Kartik here also. And I think like you must be having many programs, and you must be having so many Damodar programs, which are great opportunities to speak to the devotees. And you would have heard the great and wonderful Damodar Leela from exalted devotees also. Humility and meekness is a quality that comes together. If you look at the folio of Srila Prabhupada, and if you read and study Prabhupada's books, Prabhupada uses these two words very interchangeably, meekness and humility. In the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, I think it's in the eighth chapter, eighth verse in the purport, Prabhupada makes a very nice statement about humility. First of all, whatever I'm trying to share with you is a very small portion of the entirety of Shastra's view on humility. So please forgive me if I cannot cover everything, because time is also of the essence, and there's so much to study on humility, so much to reflect on it. But I'll try and share with you whatever I can in my limited capacity. Srila Prabhupada defines humility in the 13th chapter, 8th verse. He says there, humility means not hankering for the satisfaction of being honored by others. So that's our starting point today. Not hankering for the satisfaction of being honored by others. In other words, when we hanker for the satisfaction of others honoring us for whatever we do, taking a class, singing, any kind of service that we do, when we are hankering for that, and we find that we are not sufficiently honored, or we feel we have not been honored, and then we feel dissatisfied, actually Srila Prabhupada says that defines humility. So it's not just a case of humility means to be humble, but humility actually means it actually is measured by how much we hanker for others to honor us, actually, especially in our devotional service. We have all passed the time of wanting material honor, but even when we leave everything and come to Krishna consciousness, that baggage can still follow us. It just takes a different form. And then, we want that recognition, or we want that satisfaction of being honored. So therefore, Shastras tell us that a Vaishnava does not endeavor to prove their worth to others or themselves. That is not the goal of devotional service. We don't perform an activity with the goal that this is our way of proving who we are. And then we seek adoration, name, fame. Vaishnavas as devotees, we simply endeavor to serve and please Krishna. That is very important. In that way, Yashoda Mata was the paragon of humility. She was the mother to Krishna in Vrindavan. And in her mind, she was really the mother. And she wanted to discipline Krishna. She was worried about Krishna. But in all her activities, there was no element of wanting some honor for herself. When she started churning butter for Krishna, it was with the idea of the endeavor to serve and please Krishna. When she ran after Krishna, she was not running after Krishna like yogis run after Krishna, like demons run after Krishna, like jnanis run after Krishna. She was running after Krishna because she simply wanted to actually do something for her child, to serve him. When she wanted to bind him, she was not thinking of binding him so that she can get the accolade of being the only person, in Vrindavan history to bind Krishna. She did not feel that way. She wanted to bind him because in her mind, he was restless, as Prabhupada writes in Krishna book, and therefore he needs to be bound. So Mother Yashoda's humility is really very important here, because she did not hanker for the satisfaction of being honored. She merely wanted to serve Krishna. So this is a very important thing, because if we try to endeavor, right, to prove our worth and not please Krishna whenever we do any devotional service, then the problem is we create expectations in our hearts that others must acknowledge our service, or others must acknowledge our humility even. And this actually will be an impediment between us and our surrender to Krishna. In fact, this will be a surrender to our mind, because the mind is the one that always tells us how, people must appreciate you, how people must say how nice you are, how good you are. That is why sometimes, ironically, when the meaning of humility is not properly understood, right, we could be acting humbly just to attract other people's attention, to appreciate how humble we are. It sounds very ironical, but it happens. Sometimes, Prabhupada has written about this phrase called false humility. You must have heard about it. And sometimes false humility is something that we grapple with as devotees. If someone says, Prabhu, you sing very well, we say, yeah, it's nothing, Prabhu, it's all Krishna's mercy. But in our heart, we like it because we say, no, actually, it's my talent, But it is false humility. So it's very dangerous sometimes. Sometimes, if we are not careful, we want devotees to know how humble we are. And that's the supreme irony. A humble person never thinks that they are humble. A humble person, the moment if we think we're humble, actually something is wrong with our humility. So that is a very important thing. The starting point of developing our humility actually will come when we understand our real self in relation to Krishna. Humility is not a weakness in behavior. Sometimes in the material world, when we hear of someone being humble and submissive, especially in the corporate world, people will tell you you'll be eaten alive by others. But in the spiritual world, it's very different. If we want to understand what our material quality is, then we will see humility and meekness as something which is a weakness. But from a Vaishnava point of view, it is not. It comes from understanding who we are in relationship to Krishna. And in order for us to really understand our relationship with Krishna, that is why Bhagavatam insists at every point of Bhagavatam that we must glorify his greatness. Nivrittatarshay upagiyamana. In that shloka of 10.1.4 of Srimad Bhagavatam, what is the most important thing? It is stated clearly there that glorification of Krishna is our business, and it must be done in parampara. The beauty of parampara is that it checks our pride. Apart from all the points about parampara, never forget, parampara actually is a very helpful mechanism to check our pride. Because when we understand that whatever we are repeating is just repeating from the acharyas, it is not the result of our hard work, it is not an invention that we have come up with, it is not something innovative and amazing, but we are just repeating. It helps our humility. Because who are we to claim that what we are speaking now is so unique? It is all coming from parampara. So this parampara is there to glorify Krishna. And that is why when we want to develop humility, the whole point of Krishna consciousness is to understand the greatness of Krishna. Look at the Chatushloka in both Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. In 2.9, what was it? 2.9.33 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Aham evasam evagre, nanyad yad sat asat param, paschad aham yad etacha, yo avashyeta sosmiham. The translation makes it very clear to us. Krishna says that Brahma, it is I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was existing before creation, when there was nothing but myself. There was no material nature, which is the cause of this creation. Whatever that you see now is also I, the personality of Godhead. And after annihilation, whatever that remains is also I, the personality of Godhead. So Krishna makes it very clear that, frankly speaking, this entire world and all its glories has to do with Krishna. It doesn't have to do with us. In 10.8 of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, what is that? Aham sarvasya prabhavo mattaha sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvitaha. Krishna makes it very clear, I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. So actually, what emanates from us? Nothing emanates from us. And the wise who know this, they can perfectly engage in devotional service. And they can do it, Krishna says, with all their heart. At one point of time, remember, if you recall in Leelamrita, Srila Prabhupada was asked by Tamo Krishna Maharaj, about the nature and glory of Krishna. And then Prabhupada went on to explain how great Krishna is. He said that, we are looking at Mahavishnu in this material universe. Mahavishnu is Karno Dakashai Vishnu. He's very powerful, but he is not the summum bonum of this universe. because above him is Narayana. Above Narayana is the second expansion of Chaturvyuha. Then after that, right, we have after that there's also the first expansion of Chaturvyuha, and then there is Lord Balaram, and after Lord Balaram there is Krishna. And below Karno Dakashaya Vishnu, there is Garbho Dakashaya Vishnu, Shiro Dakashaya Vishnu. Then Prabhupada said from Garbho Dakashaya Vishnu comes the navel, lotus flower, and then there is Brahma. And from Brahma, the planetary systems are all created. And in the planetary systems, there is one planetary system, the middle, which is where there is one Earth. And within one Earth, there is one spot known in as America as a continent. And in America, there is one city. And in that city, there is one person called Tamal. And this Tamal is asking how great Krishna is. So Prabhupada made sure to tell us through through this very nice example about Tamal Krishna Maharaj, that actually we are very, very small. We're very small. That's why in another conversation, Prabhupada said, you must understand the greatness of Krishna. Imagine if you're a little boat caught in the Pacific Ocean. You're 5,000, 6,000 miles away from land. Will you feel small? You'll feel very small. In the presence of a vast ocean, we realize we are nothing. If we sit in front of the gigantic Himalayan mountain, we feel very small. In fact, if we are surrounded by massive elephants, we also feel very small. So Srila Prabhupada made it very clear that we are very small. You remember Arjuna? When Arjuna, who is such a great devotee of the Lord, and he was actually so much fixed on Krishna. And in the 11th chapter, if you recall, Krishna showed Arjuna his universal form, right? And the moment his universal form came, do you recall all the verses? The verses that Arjuna starts speaking, they speak to the greatness of Krishna and his bewilderment and his understanding that he's very, very small, that he's nothing actually. I remember I think it is 1131 of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna finally ends that whole session and he sings very beautifully. Akya himeko bhavan ugra rupo namo stute deva vari prasida vignatamicham bhavatam madhyam nahi prajanami tava pravrittim. And the translation is very nice. Arjuna says, O Lord of Lords, you are so fierce in your form. Please tell me who you are. Imagine all this time Krishna was with Arjuna and Arjuna was with Krishna. Yes, he may have seen Krishna as a friend, but he also realized at the start of the Gita that Krishna must now be his guide. But only in 11th chapter he could realize that he did not know who Krishna is. He says it in that verse, please tell me who you are. I offer my obeisances unto you. And now he says something very nice. Please be gracious to me. He wants Krishna's mercy because he cannot understand who Krishna is. He says, you are the primal Lord. I want to know about you because I don't know what your mission is. Can you imagine that? Arjuna saying that. So we can see that actually we are like little tiny dust particles in front of Krishna. In Mukunda Mala, there is a stotra, I think it is verse 14. Prithvi re nuranur payam sikanikaha falgus pulingo lagus tejo nishvasvanam maruttanutaram randram sushukshmai nabaha shudra rudra pitamaha prabhitaha kita samasta suraha drishte yatra satarako vijayate Shripadaduli Kanaha. This shloka is really nice because it really makes us understand who we really are. Krishna says in that shloka that, Mukundamala, Kulashekar Alva says in that shloka that frankly speaking, all the waters of the world, they are very great, but in front of our Savior, they are like droplets, not even droplets. Then he says, all the fires of the world, they are very powerful. They can kill off the entire universe during annihilation. But in front of Krishna, they are just like sparks, nothing more. Then he says, Nishvasvanam, those winds which are very powerful, they can move mountains. But in front of Krishna, they are like a faint sigh. You know, when you sigh, that's all. That's what it is in front of Krishna. Then he says, this vast expanse of sky, which we cannot see end to end, in front of Krishna, it is nothing but a pinhole, like Nabihi, a pinhole only. Then he says that the great devatas like Brahma and Shiva, they are all praying before Krishna. And these devatas, Kita Samasta Suraha, the devatas are like insects in front of Krishna. And then he ends by saying very nicely, just by seeing the form of Krishna and by taking one particle of the dust of the lotus feet, everything in this world becomes small in comparison to Krishna. It's an amazing verse by Kulashekar Alva, text 14 of Mukunda Mala Stotra. And this tells us just how great Krishna is. So the first step our acharyas tell us in cultivating humility in our hearts is to understand Krishna and his greatness. That is why Prabhupada said that our only business is to glorify Krishna. Isn't that so? So many times Prabhupada told us that our only business, when this Sangha comes together, our business is to glorify Krishna. That is very important. Another example given is that of the sun and the sunshine and the sun rays. In the presence of the sun, who are we actually? A sun ray may look very piercing in darkness, but the moment you see the sun ray pales in comparison. But the sun ray always is part of the sun. So our sastras tell us we are like sun rays. Because Krishna has given us that potency to have his qualities as we develop bhakti, we may appear to be very illuminating as personalities, but we must never forget in the presence of the sun, we are nothing. And yet we must also not forget, and don't be discouraged, that even though we may not be as great as the sun, we should be transcendently happy that we are sun rays and always part of the sun. This is very important. Humility doesn't mean that we become discouraged. Humility doesn't mean a lack of self-esteem. This is very important. Otherwise, what happens is we think that humility means we must have no self-esteem. I'm nothing, I'm useless. No, we are very useful as long as we are connected to Krishna. As long as we can serve Krishna, we should be transcendently proud, not materially proud. Transcendently proud that Srila Prabhupada has given us an opportunity to be part of this movement. We must be transcendently happy that Krishna has given us a chance to hear and think about him. That's very important. So therefore, the first very important point is, as we learn to understand and glorify Krishna, and as we learn to understand and glorify the greatness of his devotees, then we become humble. So understanding the greatness of devotees is very important. And that is why all our sastras insist, bhakte bhakta jana priyaha. What to speak of my devotees? Even the devotees of my devotees are dear to me. Krishna declares that in 9th canto, 4th chapter, I think 58th or 59th verse. So real humility doesn't make us arrogant. It doesn't make us depressed either, but it makes us grateful. That's the second point for today. Humility should not make us arrogant, and real humility should not make us depressed. But humility is expressed best when we are grateful. In real humility, we are just simply grateful. Anything that comes to us, we see the hand of Krishna. That is very important, very important. Do you all remember the story of the king and the minister that Prabhupada used to say? Of how the minister was always seeing the good things. He always told his king that, king, no matter what happens, always know that Krishna has some plan for you. And it's always better than what you think you are receiving. And one day, if you recall, the king went to the forest to hunt. And what happened to him? He was attacked by a lion and he lost his thumb. All the other ministers were expressing sadness and everything. But this minister sympathized with the king, but told him, by Krishna's mercy, you should still be grateful that you only lost the thumb. The king was very upset. When you lose a thumb, you think it's easy, and he sent the minister to jail, and the minister had to be in jail. Now the king went deeper in the forest and he was caught by a group of dacoits, bandits, and they wanted to prepare him for a human sacrifice. And then the chief priest of the dacoits came and told the king of the dacoits that this particular person is not fit to be sacrificed. So the king of the dacoits said, why? And he said, for us to make sure the sacrifice is successful, this person must be complete. But he's not complete because he's missing a thumb. And the king was freed. And he went back to the jail. He released the minister, embraced him, and said, now I understand why I should be grateful. Even if there's adversity, I must be humble enough to accept that Krishna still has a plan for me. And the minister was very happy with him. But the king asked him one question. If I'm grateful to Krishna for saving me, what was the joy or the benefit of you being put in the prison? And the minister said, you know, king, wherever you go, I would go. If you went to the forest, I would have gone with you. They would have kidnapped both of us. They would have put you on the altar for sacrifice and found you incomplete. They would have turned to me, and I would have been very complete, but I would have been finished. By being in jail, I was very peaceful. It's a simple story Prabhupada gave us, but it tells us how gratitude is linked to humility. You see the point? When we become grateful and see the hand of Krishna, naturally the byproduct of gratitude is humility. That is why in 119.14 of Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Parikshit Maharaj, and he is the emblem of gratitude and humility. Don't forget, he was cursed to die in 7 days. Such a great personality, saved in the womb of his mother. If you were saved in the womb of mother by Krishna, you would reasonably expect that you live for 100 years after that, isn't it? I mean, it's reasonable because you got saved. Of course, he'll save me again. But this time, after just a few years, he's cursed and he's going to die. How would I would give up Krishna consciousness. Parikshit Maharaj didn't do that. I would be very upset. I'll be proud. I've done so much for Krishna. How can he give me up like that? But Parikshit Maharaj in 119.14, when he saw all the sages assembled, and when he was going to sit down to hear Bhagavatam, he said so beautifully, Tasyeva meghasya paravaresho vyasakta chittasya graheshu abhikshnam nirveda mulo dvijasa parupo yatra prasakto bhayamashu datte. The meaning is beautiful. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the controller of both transcendental and mundane worlds. He has graciously overtaken me in the form of a Brahmana's curse. Look at the words Prabhupada uses. Graciously overtaken me. Why graciously? Graciously has two meanings in this. One, when someone graciously overtakes you, in other words, he does it, right, for a good cause. He's doing it out of his grace. That is why the word grace and mercy are instinctively linked to humility. You see the point? They are invariably linked to humility. Here you have Parikshit Maharaj, the greatest of his generation of devotees. And yet he had graciously accepted that Krishna had graciously overtaken him by coming in the form of Brahmana's curse. In other words, we are so happy to see Krishna as a deity. How many of us are ready to see Krishna in his murti form of a curse? It's very difficult for us to accept it. What if Krishna came in the form of a dilapidating disease so that we have to concentrate and spend more time with him? Would we see Krishna that way? What if Krishna came in the form of a slap on our face because a devotee chastised us? Would we say, that, oh, my dear devotee, you have graciously overtaken me in the form of a slap? It's difficult. But Parikshit Maharaj showed that to us. And you know how he built his humility? By telling Krishna that, Krishna, I know why you have overtaken me. You have overtaken me because I'm too attached to family life. And because I'm so attached to it, you have saved me. Because I will never detach myself from it if I was just left to be. You see the point? So Krishna is very clear. He's very powerful also. But you have to understand his greatness. And that is why Prabhupada taught us that gratitude is the hallstone of humility. Very important. I think there's some noise going on somewhere. Maybe devotees can mute it. That would be good. be helpful to others. Thank you. So therefore, real humility is the understanding flowing from that point of being grateful. It is the real understanding that we are all servants and instruments of Krishna. In 1133, that point is nicely stated by Krishna to Arjuna, isn't it? He says so nicely to him that, frankly speaking, Krishna, you just do one thing. Mayai vaite nihata purva evam, nimitta mata bhavya savya sachi. Please know that you are an instrument in the fight. You're an instrument in my plan because Mayai vaite, by my order, I have allowed whoever who needs to live, and by my order, who is to die will die. When we accept that as devotees, we naturally become humble. That is a very important point. So please remember, first there is greatness of Krishna. Then with greatness must come glorification of Krishna. There's no point saying something is great, but you don't glorify it. There's a difference. There in Lilamrita also, I remember reading, the devotees were taking a walk with Srila Prabhupada along an ocean, one of his many walks, and they looked at the ocean, and some of the devotees remarked, how great is this ocean? And Srila Prabhupada said, how great must be the creator who created this ocean, and how grateful we must be to him. Very simple line, but it shows us the humility of Prabhupada that he displayed here actually. So when Arjuna became the instrument to Krishna, he could only do so because he exercised humility. Please remember that. If we want to be an instrument at the lotus feet of Krishna, we can only do so if we become an instrument to be used to serve him. That is very important. Do you remember Govinda, the chief servant of Mahaprabhu? After Mahaprabhu had a beautiful dance of Rath Yatra, he was very tired. And after that, he lay down, at Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house. He lay at this at the edge of the door, and he just lay there. And Govinda was supposed to massage his feet. So what happened was Govinda came and he requested the Lord, please move my Lord so I can cross over. He didn't want to cross over him because it is not respectful. But Mahaprabhu said, no, I'm too tired. Do whatever you want. And so Govinda crossed over. Now, crossing over is considered an offense. But he crossed over because he needed to serve Krishna, Mahaprabhu. And he wanted to massage Mahaprabhu's feet. Then Mahaprabhu told him, after you finish massaging, you can go and have your prasadam. Now, for Govinda to go, he had to cross over. When Mahaprabhu woke up an hour later, Govinda had not crossed. He was still sitting there. So Mahaprabhu said, why did you not cross? You crossed the first time. Why did you not cross the second time? And Govinda kept quiet. But Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that actually the Lord was very pleased with Govinda's humility. Because when Govinda crossed over, he did that because he was an instrument of the Lord to serve him. He was not crossing him on the grounds of pride. He needed to do the service. When the gopis were told by Narada that Krishna had a transcendental headache and that only dust from the lotus feet of the devotees would actually save him, the gopis started stomping around like elephants, right? And then gathering all the dust from the lotus feet and packing it up in bags and giving it to Narada and said, pour everything on Krishna so that he'll get better. And Narada said, are you sure you want to do this? Because every other pure devotee I've asked has said, I'm not giving dust from my feet because I will go to hell if that touches Krishna's head. I'm not qualified enough. But the gopi said, if it's going to help Krishna, and if you think we are qualified enough because it's going to help Krishna, and if it means we have to go to hell, so be it. You see the difference between genuine humility and false humility. So humility doesn't mean that you don't recognize that you can do something for Krishna. Please don't think that way. Now, everybody should not deny the next time Prabhu asks, who's going to give class? Oh, Prabhu, we're all very fallen. Nobody does class. Who can sweep the floor? Prabhu, I'm too fallen to sweep the floor. It's not going to help anyone. ISKCON will come to a standstill if the devotees are in that state of humility. Nothing will move. Oh, I can't do pujari work, Prabhu. I'm just too fallen. No, it will fall. So therefore, humility is a very balanced idea in Krishna consciousness. You must be confident that you can be an instrument in Krishna's hands, but always know that without Krishna, right, you cannot have that strength. This is what Arjuna did in Srimad Bhagavatam. Krishna, Krishna, Mahabaho, Bhaktanam abhayankaraha Tvameko dayyamananam apavargosi samstritehe. How nice. The Ashwatthama's Brahmastra was coming at Krishna, at Arjuna. Now Arjuna had the power to neutralize it. He had the power. But what did he do? He stepped down from his chariot. He did Achaman, Bhagavatam says. Can you imagine? He had time for Achaman also. Weapon was coming, but he had time for Achaman. And then he circumambulated Krishna. And then he chanted Krishna, Krishna, Mahabaho, and three other verses. He chanted 4 verses together. And after chanting that, he invoked the auspicious blessings of Krishna, and he became an instrument. And then he released his weapon to counteract the Brahmastra. What does that show us? Is it that Arjuna was very proud of his prowess? No. He accepted that whatever power that is coming from him is actually coming from Krishna. It's not coming from anyone else. This is such an important point that we should understand that whatever we have is all coming from Krishna, and that will keep us humble. When you have time, look at this verse. I think it's 1:15:21. 1:15:21. If you want to understand humility, by the way, just study the whole 15th chapter of the first canto. Because there, Arjuna is in separation from Krishna. And when Yudhishthir Maharaj asks, why are you looking so sad after you came back from Dwarka? He then begins to speak of all the time Krishna actually was with him, and how without Krishna's mercy, I could not do this. Without Krishna's grace, I could not do this. Without Krishna's, guidance, I could not do this. All of that is a lesson in humility. And the crowning glory of all the verses is the verse 21. Because there he sings, Tad Vaidanusta Ishava Sarato Hayaste Soham Rati Nripatayo Yata Anamanti Sarvam Shanena Tarabud Asa Ishariktam Bhasman Hutam Kuhakara Damivoptam Ushyam. The translation is very beautiful. He's speaking to Yudhishthir Maharaj. He's saying now, I have the very same Gandiva bow, the same arrows, the same chariot drawn by the same horses. And I use them as the same Arjuna, to whom all the kings offered their respects. But in the absence of Lord Krishna, all of them, my bow, my arrows, my horses, my chariot, I, Arjuna, all of them, at a moment's notice, have become null and void. It is exactly like an offering where you offer ghee, into ash. What is the point of offering ghee into ash? No fire will come up. It's just like accumulating money with a magic wand. It never happens. Or trying to sow seeds in a barren land. What is the point? You see? So Prabhupada in that purport says very nicely, right? One should not be puffed up by borrowed plumes, Plumes. Sometimes when we have plumes, we borrow them and we put them up, and then we think we look very nice in it. But actually, we don't. Prabhupada says all energy and power are derived from the Supreme Source, Krishna. And they act as long as he desires, and they will cease to function as soon as he withdraws. This is very important. Then Prabhupada says, as long as the parent allows the child to play, the child can play. But the moment the parent stops it, right, it is finished. This is a very important point. And that's why Prabhupada ends that point by saying so nicely that actually we should know and we should give credit to Krishna, because Krishna is the person who is responsible for all our greatness. Therefore, we must understand one thing, that actually, if we really want to be humble, being an instrument means that we know that Krishna can invest us with strength if he so wants. And on that strength, have the confidence to actually work very hard for Krishna. This is a very important point for us. So having understood that, we now understand that real humility means this prayer. My only qualification is the order of my spiritual master and Krishna. You remember how when people ask Prabhupada, how amazing you have created something out of nothing. What did Prabhupada say? Prabhupada said, all credit goes to my spiritual master. I am simply an instrument in his hands. That's all I am. I am nothing more. This is a very important thing we should remember. And Prabhupada led the way by example, by showing us this is the way we do. If Krishna wants to give us potency, we can do anything that he wishes. So you can be humble, but you can also be confident. You can be meek, but you can be confident, not of your strength, but of the strength of Krishna if he wants to give it to you. In third canto, 29th chapter, I think it's in the 17 or 18, no, it's in the 18th verse in the purport. Prabhupada makes a very nice statement. I want to share that with you all. He says that a devotee should not be proud of his acquisitions. The symptom of a devotee are meekness and humility. Although spiritually advanced, the devotee is always meek and humble. Prabhupada gives the example of Kaviraj Goswami Maharaj and all the other Vaishnavas. By their example, they taught us how to be humble. Do you remember Madhavendra Puri? Madhavendra Puri is the father of our devotional service, because it is only starting with Madhavendra Puri in our parampara that the mood of love for Krishna from the point of Madhurya Ras actually began to take root. Till then, it was not strong. Madhavendra Puri had established that. Madhavendra Puri went to see Krishna as Shirachor Gopinath. And he wanted to, when he heard that this temple of Shirachor Gopinath has the best sweet rice in the whole universe, before they could offer it, he wanted to taste it. You know what I mean? Before they could offer it to Krishna, he wanted to taste it. And the moment that happened, right, he became very ashamed of himself. When I remember reading that pastime when I was young, I was thinking, what is there for him to be so ashamed of? Then I realized that's what I'm doing all the time. Before the prasadam is offered, I can't wait to eat it. But Madhavendra Puri was such a cultured soul. He thought Krishna has not taken it. How can I hanker for it? And feeling that way, right, with all humility and meekness, he left the temple and he went to sleep. He felt that his desire was not right. He's such an acharya, but see his humility. But because his humility was so genuine, Krishna decided to reciprocate. And Krishna stole one pot of the sweet rice and kept it between the folds of his dhoti. Imagine that. Krishna is Makan Chor in Damodar Leela. And Krishna stole a pot of sweet rice for his devotee hardly a few hundred years ago. Not even long time ago in Vrindavan, just a few recently only, he just stole something for his devotee. And then he made the pujari wake up with a dream. Because in the dream, Krishna told him, wake up and take one pot. You think you have taken all the sweet rice, but no, I've deceived you. I've kept one pot for myself. And I don't want it for myself. I want it for my devotee Madhavendra. You go and find him in outside and give it to him. Pujari woke up. What a dream. Maybe it's real. He went inside. He turned on the light. And true enough, within the folds of the dhoti, the deity had hidden and stolen his own sweet rice. It's amazing, right? When we talk about Krishna stealing, actually, what is there for him to steal? Everything belongs to Krishna. And yet, he steals. But his stealing is nice pastime. You steal and there is no pastime. You end up in jail. Only Krishna has this pastime and everyone loves it. And so Madhavendra Puri was sleeping when this devotee came, the pujari came with the pot and started shouting, Madhavendra Puri, who are you? And he came out of the dharamshala and he said, yes, I'm Madhavendra Puri. What is it? He said, you are the greatest and most fortunate man in all three universes. And he fell flat at his lotus feet. And he said, the deity Gopinath has stolen this sweet rice just for you. And when Madhavendra Puri heard that, what was his mood in Bhagavatam? His mood was not pride. Oh, what a great person I am. No, he felt even more humbled that despite the fact that he was so fallen in his offense to Krishna, Krishna was so gracious and so loving and so compassionate. This is humility. You know why? Because Madhavendra Puri expressed gratitude. You see the point? He expressed gratitude. And gratitude comes automatically with humility. Very important. Very important. So there's no need to artificially create humility. If you count your blessings and see everything as Krishna's hand, naturally without byproducts, right? Without separate endeavor, the humility will come in our hearts. But you see, remember at the very start, we defined humility as the act of not wanting honor for yourself, isn't it? But now in Madhavendra Puri's Leela, after he heard that the pot had been stolen, Madhavendra Puri decided, better I leave now, because everybody will be starting to talk about it. If I was Madhavendra Puri, I'll stay, because they will offer flowers to me. I'll get free lodging, free food, free shelter, and I'll become very happy. Overnight, we become acharyas. But Madhavendra Puri traveled ahead. But Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita tells us, even as he traveled to the next town, word of his greatness and his devotion had already reached that town. So he wasn't fast enough. Why? Because when Krishna sees a devotee humble and meek, Krishna glorifies him to the whole three worlds. This is the greatness of understanding that we don't have potency. Everything comes from Krishna. That's why all these great acharyas, Prabhupada says, they were humbler than a blade of grass and more tolerant than a tree. Tolerance will come on the strength of your humility. Humility is the fuel for tolerance. And that's why a Vaishnava should always remain very humble and meek. And when he's humble and meek, he can then offer respects to others. Do you remember the story of Chitraketu Maharaj, of how he acted so rudely, isn't it? Criticizing Lord Shiva, laughing on his airplane, of how is it that Lord Shiva can be seated there with all the great sages, but he can have Parvati Mata on his lap. In that purport, there is a purport there, 6:17:10. It's very important, 6:17:10. Chitraketu Maharaj, right, had actually remarked such a thing about Lord Shiva, and that angered Parvati Mata. So Parvati Mata came down, she became very upset. She got off the lap of Lord Shiva and she cursed Chitraketu Maharaj. She cursed him. When Chitraketu Maharaj heard that, did he become proud? He did not. He understood that what he had done was not correct. And he came down and put his hands together and he bowed before Parvati Mata. This is a very dynamic part of humility. It doesn't mean that if we have made mistakes in not being humble, it doesn't mean we cannot learn from the mistakes. Chitraketu Maharaj proved that to us. Yes, what he should have done is not correct, but immediately he rectified it. He did not continue. Sometimes, the human tendency is when someone calls us out for making a mistake, our pride is hurt. And even though we behave like we're humble, actually we can't take it already. And when that happens, right, we retaliate. We retaliate. And then we fight. Chitraketu Maharaj could have argued with Parvati Mata. No, that's not what I meant. This is what I meant. How can you say this? But he didn't. He accepted it. That is on the grounds of his humility. Parikshit Maharaj did the same thing. He should not have put the garland of snake on Shamika Rishi. But the moment he did that, right, he was humble enough to admit and become repentant. You see the point? So our great acharyas are showing us that there is always hope for us to learn to cultivate humility. We may have been proud here and there. It is natural. After all, so many millions of years we have been conditioned. It is natural to think that we think something belongs to us. But if we are continuing with sincere devotional service, if we are studying all these things nicely, then we can repent. And the moment we repent, like Parikshit Maharaj did, like Chitraketu Maharaj did, then that kind of pride will be checked. So you see, Parikshit Maharaj, Chitraketu Maharaj, when he spoke not very nicely of Lord Shiva, Prabhupada writes in that purport of the 17th chapter, 10th verse, Prabhupada says the difficulty was that Chitraketu, having become a great devotee of Lord Vishnu, Sankarshan, was somewhat proud at having achieved Lord Sankarshan's favor. And therefore, he thought he could now criticize anyone, even Lord Shiva. This kind of pride in a devotee is never tolerated. See, Prabhupada writes there, this kind of pride in a devotee, not a materialist, is never tolerated. A Vaishnava should always remain very humble and meek and offer respects to others. So the moment a Vaishnava is not humble, Krishna is so kind through either himself or the agency of another Vaishnava. He forces someone to become humble. He makes them learn. You all have heard Govardhan Leela, isn't it, recently? Do you remember the part when after Krishna put down the hill, what did he do? After he put down the hill, he went to a secluded spot. Why did he go to secluded spot? Because he didn't want to embarrass Indra, who was coming to see him. Indra was already shaken up by his pride. Krishna had smashed his pride. Indra had no humility at that point of time. But after he saw how the residents of Vrindavan were saved by Krishna, that episode humbled Indra. But it was not Krishna's intention to embarrass someone who's become humble. So Krishna went to a faraway spot so that he could wait for Indra to come and offer his apologies to him. See? So actually, our mountain of pride is very often checked by Krishna. If we are doing nice sadhana and we're doing nice devotional service, it doesn't mean we will not make mistakes. But it means when we do make mistakes, Krishna will give us the chance to rectify ourselves. And that's why Chitraketu Maharaj rectified himself and he became the great Vritrasur, who would speak such great, amazing things to all of us, isn't it? So this is a very important thing for us to understand. Another important point as we wind down our discussion today is another purport, is also in the same purport. Prabhupada says there in the same purport that a Vaishnava should not try to minimize anyone else's position. This will prevent humility from growing in our hearts. It's very important. If we want to cultivate humility and meekness in our heart, do not minimize anyone else's position. Sometimes the tendency is there because we think we're doing great service, and what is he doing? After all, he's not doing so much. He's in the kitchen. I'm the one giving class. My service is greater. Therefore, by logic, I am greater. In that way, we minimize someone's. Remember the simple episode of Ramayana? The little squirrel was trying to throw all the little pebbles into the water. And Hanumanji and the Vanara said, move aside, little boy. We'll take care of it, okay? Don't waste time. But then Lord Ram came out. And Lord Ram said, and very nicely he stated it, that the service done by the squirrel is as important and deeply appreciated by me as it is done by the great boulders you have thrown. Because it is not how big the service is that is important. It is how much of love he is putting in the service that's important. So we should never minimize someone's position. Prabhupada says it is better to remain humble and meek and chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Chitraketu thought he was a better controller of his senses than Lord Shiva. So he wanted to minimize him, but actually he was not. And that is why Mother Parvati was frightfully angry. And Prabhupada makes a statement in that purport, which is amazing. You should put it up somewhere. All of us should write it somewhere. So whenever we pass by some place, we will see it. Unless one is humble and meek, one cannot qualify to sit at the lotus feet of the Lord. Amazing, amazing point. So actually, on their personal behalf, Vaishnavas are meek and tolerant. But if Krishna's service demands that a humble Vaishnava must do the needful in the mood of service, we will do it. We would do it. That is very important. Let not our humility or false humility be an impediment to our service to Krishna. Very important. One last thing we can share with you. I've shared quite a few episodes of humility, but one thing that comes to mind, and this is something that always touches my heart, is how humble Ambrish Maharaj was. And I say it both as Ambrish Maharaj in Bhagavatam and Ambrish Maharaj Prabhu who's here. But now I speak about Ambrish Maharaj in Bhagavatam. Ambrish Maharaj in Bhagavatam was so humble and meek that when Durvasa Muni fell at his feet, if you recall, after 1 year tour all around the 3 worlds of trying to escape Sudarshan Chakra, he went for a tirtha that was so silly. He should have just fallen at the lotus feet of the devotee, but he minimized the position of Ambrish Maharaj. That's why he had to go for a roundabout. When you minimize the position of a devotee, you have to work very hard to come to the realization that you have minimized the position. Now, when Durvasa Muni finally came back after Lord Vishnu put some sense into his head, when he came back and he fell at the lotus feet of Ambrish Maharaj in Bhagavatam became naturally very ashamed. He did not feel, very good. After 1 year, you've fallen at my feet. You deserve it. He didn't feel like that. In fact, Bhagavatam says he felt shy and ashamed. And if you read the 9th canto, 5th chapter in the summary, Prabhupada writes so nicely, by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Durvasa Muni went immediately to Maharaj Ambrish and fell at his lotus feet. Maharaj Ambrish, being naturally very humble and meek, felt shy and ashamed because Durvasa Muni had fallen at his feet. And then he began to offer his prayers to Sudarshan Chakra. And one of his prayers is very nice. It shows his humility. It's in 9, 5, 11 of Srimad Bhagavatam. Yadi no Bhagavan Prita Ek sarva gunashrayah sarva bhutatma bhavena dvijo bhavatu vijvaraha. The translation is really nice. If the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is one without a second, who is the reservoir of all transcendental qualities, who is the life and soul of all living entities, if he is pleased with us, we wish that this Brahmana Durvasa Muni will be freed from the pain of being burned. He didn't say, notice, he did not say that Krishna, he has fallen at my feet, now you jolly well help him. He didn't say that. He didn't feel that, oh, it's very great, he has fallen at my feet. All right, now please, I now forgive you and I let you go. No, he said that if Krishna wants, if Krishna is ready, if Krishna feels, that I can ask this from you, then please relieve him. See the mood of genuine humility. That is the greatness of Maharaj Ambarish. And you know what was the response of Durvasa Muni? I like that even more. In 9.5.14, Durvasa Muni said something really nice. Aho ananta dashanam mahatvam drishtamadhyame kritaga sopi yadrajan mangalani samihase. What does he say? My dear king, today I've experienced the greatness of devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why? What is their greatness? Although I have committed an offense, you prayed for my good fortune. That is an exhibition of true humility. True humility is when others mean bad for us, we always mean well for them. That is really an expression of our humility. Otherwise, we would think, he doesn't wish well for me. Why should I wish well for him? That is an expression of pride. This is very important. This is the mood of Ambarish Maharaj. And what a nice realization Durvasa Muni actually gave, actually. So it's a very important point for us to remember. And one last thing about humility is this idea of instrument, to understand that who am I next to Krishna? The person who actually showed us the best thing is probably Sudama. In the famous shloka, in the 10th canto, I think it's 81st chapter. Kwaham daridra papiyan, kwa Krishna Shriniketanaha, Brahma bandhuriti smaham, bahubhyam parirambitaha. What does he say? He says, who am I? A sinful, poor friend of a Brahmana. And who is Krishna? The Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nonetheless, he has embraced me with his two arms. Sudama went to see Krishna, and his wife was hoping he would get something back. But Sudama had unconditional love for Krishna. And even though Krishna didn't give him anything at that point, he didn't come out thinking, what is this? After all, I'm somebody, isn't it? I was with him, I was his playmate. He should do something for me. There was no expectation. Instead, he thought, who am I after all? Krishna doesn't want to give me something because he knows that if he gives me something, I will forget devotional service. So because of that, he has not given me anything. This is the mood of humility of a devotee. So to wind up our time together, I would humbly share with you this idea of humility that Prabhupada gives us. And that is, if we really want to develop humility, we must first understand the greatness of Krishna. We must always be focused on the glorification of Krishna and the glorification of his devotees. That is the starting point. We should not be too concerned about our glorification. If it comes, well and good. We give all credit to our spiritual masters. If it doesn't come, well and good. Because it is not why we are doing the service. We are doing the service to please Krishna. And when we are endowed with some potency, some talent, then we should not be puffed up about that either. We should keep in mind that if Krishna wants, he can withdraw it anytime. And if Krishna has given it to us, he's given it to us so that we can use it in his service, which means we will always be servants of Krishna. and we will always be servants of the Lord. If something goes wrong in our life, we should not be proud and think that, why should we deserve this? That is an expression of pride. What we should be asking is, why don't we deserve this? That is an expression of humility. When the cow and the bull were beaten by the personality of Kali, and Parikshit Maharaj came and he asked them to name the perpetrator, what did they say? They said that, frankly speaking, we don't know who our perpetrator is, because there must be a cause behind the cause of what the perpetrator is doing. And by saying that, they were actually expressing that someone may have beaten us, but there is someone behind all of this, and that is ultimately Krishna. So why should we blame someone for our difficulties? So you see, when humility becomes part of our living, so many advantages come for us as devotees. We learn to see the hand of Krishna. We learn to be proper, good instruments of Krishna. We don't lose self-esteem. We are confident. We are confident only because we know we have the blessings of Krishna and the blessings of the Acharyas. That is humility. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Srila Gurudev ki, Nitai Gaura Premanande. Thank you very much, Prabhus and Matajis. I know it's late there, and you're very kind to give me time here, in the afternoon. I couldn't do it in the morning because we had Damodar programs. I have one Damodar program in an hour. So thank you for giving me the chance to take the time in between to speak to you and have your association. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Prabhuji, for, as I said earlier as well, that you are so busy, but still, whenever we request for hearing from you, you always find some time for all of us. So thank you very much, Prabhuji. And
I want to find time, Prabhu. I need this association.
Do you still have some time for taking some questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a few minutes. Yes.
Okay, fine. So if anyone has any questions, then please raise your hands and take the opportunity to clarify your doubts.
Or any realizations also. I would love to hear realizations too, please.
Yes, Sita Mataji, please
Sita
go ahead.
Mataji. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Danvat Param. Thank you so much for the wonderful class, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, Keshav had a question which he has been asking me. Keshav, would you quickly like to say?
How do you be humble in your school when there's lots of competitions?
That's a good question. How do you stay humble in your school when there's lots of competition? I assume that you're saying that you have to stay humble because even though you have competition, you must be doing very well. And that's why, the challenge of being humble comes. It is if you have a lot of competition in your school and there are students doing well, but you're doing very well too, you must accept that Krishna has given you intelligence and you must thank Krishna. And if you have to compete with other students, don't be proud, but be confident that you are just as good as them and you can compete with them because you have Krishna. And competing with other students is your duty at the moment. You have to be the best student you have to be. So being competitive is not a wrong thing to do. It's very good. But knowing that Krishna is behind you is the most important thing. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Thank you, Keshav. Good question. Yes.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Mataji?
Yeah, Aparna Mataji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, wonderful lecture. Thank you so much. My question was, Prabhuji, like you very well explained, that take humility as strength, not as a weakness. So humility and meekness has to be taken as strength because we are relying on Krishna for everything. But say, for example, somebody is at zero level. Somebody is not humble. He's not meek, but he does have a realization that he has to be meek. He has to be humble. So what is the starting point for such person to get to that ideal stage of being humbled and meek and entirely depending on Krishna for everything which is happening around Prabhuji? So is there any practical tips or anything practically which we can sort of follow for that?
Are you talking about a situation, Mataji, where the devotee doesn't feel that he or she is humble and meek, but wants to come to a point where they can be humble and meek? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, Prabhuji. So maybe like they're having pride or they're having a lot of arrogance or whatever, but they have a realization that whatever they are doing for their nature, it's not the right thing, it's not the best thing. They want to get to a stage where they can be, a true devotee of Krishna with humbleness and meekness. So how do
No,
they
this
progress?
is a very good question, because the truth is, I think almost all of us are in that situation at some point or the other. But you have in a way answered the question. When a devotee sincerely is aware that he or she is actually having qualities which are not very Vaishnava-like, like when the devotee is honest enough to admit in their hearts that I'm not a very humble person, I require, a lot of patting on my back, and I think I'm very good at something, but I accept that quality is not a very good quality. That repentance, that honesty attracts Krishna, Mataji. And when such a devotee prays to Krishna, to please Krishna, move me from point A to point B, Krishna will send devotees, will create situations, will create opportunities for that devotee to be able to advance and to learn to check such qualities like pride or greed or lust or need for hankering and things like that. My experience, and it is really in Bhagavatam also, that when a devotee, look at Chitraketu Maharaj, he's a good example. Chitraketu Maharaj was actually a very sincere devotee of the Lord. He had just seen Sankarshan, how exalted he must be. At the same time, he showed us that even at an exalted level, there's always the possibility that we can feel these feelings. But the moment he felt it and he was checked, he was aware enough to understand that what he did was not right. And so he made amends by praying and asking for forgiveness. We may be in situations where we find we don't want to be the way we are. One way to change it is to increase the quality of our devotional service. When you increase the quality of your devotional service and take more association and guidance from devotees who are your sikshas or your dikshas, that association will help guide you to come to that position. It is very possible. It is very doable, but it just requires the ability of the devotee to reach out for help. That's what is very important. Is that helpful, Mataji?
Oh, indeed. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for a wonderful answer. Sudharma Prabhuji, yes, Sudharma Mataji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam for such a
Jai,
wonderful.
Hare Krishna.
I have just one question about how we grow in our humility. I feel like it is more tied up with the false ego. As long as one has false ego, I think, can't be humble, isn't it, Prabhuji? Can you please throw some light on that?
Yeah, that is true. You see, when we study Sankhya Yoga in the third canto of Bhagavatam, the word ego comes in. True ego is actually the position of us knowing that we are servitors. False ego is when we think that we are controllers. So by default, Bhagavatam tells us that we start our lives always thinking we are controllers. Because most of us, may not have done so much devotional service. We grow up with the idea that we are controllers. But Krishna is very kind. He exposes us eventually to devotional service. And through Prabhupada and the books, we start to learn that false ego is actually not the true state of our ego. Our true ego, Bhagavatam says, is what we call the real ego. Right? It's stated in Bhagavatam as real ego. So having an ego is not an issue. But the ego should tell us that we are servants of the servants of the servants. That is our ego. But when the ego tells us we are masters of the masters of the masters, then it is false ego. So as long as we keep reminding ourselves that we must interact with devotees in the mood of service, that interaction will check our false ego gradually. It won't happen overnight, Prabhu, right? Bhagavatam says it is Shanai. Shanai means it will be gradual. It will happen. That mistaken identity of me and mine will go, but it will go on the basis of two things. Vasudevanukampaya, by the mercy of the Lord, right? Bhagavad Bhakti Yogena, by the linking process of devotional service. When these two are there, then Tirodate Shanai Iha. Then what happens is gradually this misconception of false ego will actually leave us. The verse is 3, 7, 12 of Srimad Bhagavatam. You can read it. It's the only verse in whole Bhagavatam that specifically and directly addresses this. And it's an amazing verse, actually. Is that helpful, Prabhu?
Thank you. Yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, I have one question. So, when something good happens, like in the case of Madhavendra Puri, where a kheer pot was given to him and the deities have given, it is easy to see that as a mercy and be grateful about that. But in Srimad Bhagavatam, as you have mentioned, there are so many examples where Parikshit Maharaj, you talked about Chitraketu Maharaj, and also Narad Muni's previous life. So whenever something bad was also happening, they were able to see that as the special mercy of the Supreme Lord. And as practicing devotees, we find that especially difficult to see that special mercy from the Supreme Lord when something difficult is happening. Is there anything that we can do at that time to see that as a special mercy?
Just before you say that, I'll also share something that just came to mind as you said it. Actually, Prabhu, the more dangerous of the two is when everything is going very well. That's the time when we are caught and we don't even know it. Oh, it's so nice. Everything is nice. The pride is growing, but we don't check it because Krishna is giving sweet rice and this and that, and everything is good. But when we are slapped, actually, it's easier because then, oh my God, things are bad. Why? And some kind Vaishnava sits down and tells us, Prabhu, you're going through a difficult time, but it's the mercy of Krishna. But when a kind Vaishnava comes and says, Prabhu, you're going through a good time, but you have to be very careful, you won't hear them. Prabhu, I'm doing fine. What's the problem? The mercy is falling on me. So it's really, that's why Madhavendra Puri stands for a subtle principle that when things are going really well, and we are happy with devotional service because we're getting so much of accolades, we may mistake that for advancement. But when a Vaishnava is slapped left, right, center, he cannot mistake that for advancement. He must realize things have gone really wrong. I have to do something about it. And that's why the great devotees, when they're in difficulty, they turn to devotee association. And in that devotee association, it may not happen overnight, but they will get the courage to see Krishna's hand in it. They will. It's a very difficult road, Prabhu, very difficult road. I remember this wonderful young girl, she was maybe 8 or 9. Her name was Nandini, and she was in Mumbai, ISKCON Juhu. And I knew her parents very well, and they were Pakka devotees in the congregation. And they were doing so nicely. And that girl, had the blessings of all the sannyasis and gurus coming through ISKCON Juhu. And one day, Prabhu, she was left in the house and the parents went to work. And when they came back, they found her strangled. Someone had walked into the house and I think they wanted to do something to her. She resisted and they actually strangled her. And I remember because I was also in India at that time, the whole community, was devastated. Imagine the parents in that state of mind. Gopa Krishna Maharaj, Radhanath Maharaj, all the devotees there, they all senior devotees, all came for the funeral. They spent time with the devotees, and spoke to the mother and father. And when I spoke to them after a month or so, when I went back to India, they both were very distraught. They missed Nandini very much. But they both told me one thing amazing. They said that when we took association of our spiritual masters, they told us that Nandini was a very special child because through what appeared to be a very inexplicable circumstance, she was taken to be with Krishna earlier. She could have lived a whole life. She may have given much more to ISKCON, but Krishna wanted her for other purposes. And they said that their association actually helped us to get through this difficult time. We miss her. And we are in a personal movement. We're not in an impersonal movement. We will miss things. We will feel the calamities. It will hurt us. Even Krishna as Lord Varaha was hurt by the harsh words of Hiranyaksha. Why can't we be hurt also? Isn't it? So it will be difficult. But with the devotees, we will slowly understand through devotional service that Krishna has a plan. And because Krishna's plans are not always made known earlier, we must continue to have faith in Krishna. So that's the best way I can answer you, Prabhu. It's a difficult thing. I've seen devotees gone through it. Some of them take years to recover. Some do bounce back. But today, the husband and wife, they're in a very good space. Every year, there's an anniversary of Nandini, and they remember and glorify her in the whole temple. Everyone remembers her, and so do they. But they would not have got through it if not for the association of devotees and serious study of Srila Prabhupada's books. That helped them. So I hope it helps, Prabhu.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, do you have some more time? There is still
I have for one more, maybe. Sudanva
Okay.
Prabhu raised
Yeah.
his hand.
Let's take that question as a last question.
Sure.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandat Pranam. I have a question.
Dandavats.
Thanks for the
Yes,
wonderful
Madhvi.
tip and very practical tips as well, Prabhuji. I would like to ask this question. You mentioned in the lecture, like when others think bad for us, we should mean well for us, for them. So that is the real humility, you said. So practically, when I see, like, when you see, like, somebody is thinking bad for you, you wanted to prove, no, I'm right, or, what you're thinking for me is not right. So, but you say, like, we should not be like that. Like you gave the example of Amarish Maharaj and Durvasa, how he was so humble. But it's practically it becomes very hard, like when we want to prove ourselves, saying, no, I'm right, you were wrong. So how you come out of this mentality? Unless we come out of this, we can't develop humility at all.
Absolutely true. This mentality of I have to prove something, you have to prove something is the product of Kali Yuga. It is. But a devotee learns to know when to walk away. That is renunciation, Mataji. You know, when Kalayavana came to stand in front of Krishna and Krishna had to fight him, Kalayavana displayed his prowess, but Krishna walked away from him. And Kalayavana said, you're a coward. But Krishna today is known as Rancho Rai because of his walking pastime. He walked away because he was renounced. Prabhupada explains in Krishna book that the Rancho Rai pastime is to show that sometimes in situations which do not make you remember Krishna and which are agitating materially, we have to employ the spirit of renunciation and walk away from it. If it's going to if it's going to come down to a dogfight between I am right and you are right, better we just decide, let Krishna decide who is right. If you feel you're right, I cannot convince you. I can explain to you. That doesn't mean we don't explain. Sometimes when we had misunderstandings with Vaishnavas, it's very possible they think they're right. It doesn't mean, Mataji, at that point in time, we stop and we say, oh, okay, fine, let me walk away from it. No, you have the right to engage the devotee or maybe get a senior devotee to sit there and say, Prabhu, this is what you're thinking, but I want to explain to you what I feel. And I'm not saying it to make myself seem right. You just need to know what I feel. After that, if you still feel you're right, that's up to you. But let it not be said that I did not express what I said. So say your piece. And if nothing happens, walk away. That's what we should do, Mataji. And in that way, we'll be peaceful. Because how much can we convince someone who doesn't want to be convinced? You know, sometimes there's a saying, it's very difficult to wake up a man who pretends to sleep. You cannot wake him up because he's pretending to sleep, right? You cannot help those who put their hands on their eyes and say, oh, it is very dark, very dark. You can't because they won't take their hands off. So with some people, you can stand upside down for 30,000 years, but they will still say they're right. Why we have to engage for the next 30,000 years of our life in that situation? In that time, better you learn one shloka, you can chant few rounds, you can do some service for Krishna, and you can pray for this devotee. It's much better, isn't it? That is renunciation. Is that helpful?
Beautiful answer, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So nice to see
Thank
you
you.
all during Kartik Mas.
Thank you very much, Devakinandan Prabhuji. That was very amazing and so many practical tips. And we are really, really looking forward to have your association here. Let us show our appreciation by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Hare,
Thank you.
Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you, Prabhuji.
Thank
See you
you.
soon.
Have a wonderful last 2 days of Damodar. Oh, your day is over. Tomorrow is your last day. Have a
One more day
wonderful
is
time.
remaining.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.